Hello, in this video I'm going to talk about the types of objects that you can have in a text-based adventure game, and there's not that many of them. There's really, 4 or 5 at most, and it's not hard to wrap your brain around this. So, first type of object I'm going to talk about are containers and supporters. Containers, that's pretty obvious. Supporters, maybe not so much. If you want to be able to put objects inside of another object, that object that you're going to put the things in needs to be marked as a container. And there's actually a checkbox if you go into Lantern to make an object a container. So if you want to put something inside it, an object, check the box to make it a container, and then you'll be able to put things inside it. So examples of containers would be a box, a backpack, a storage locker, a treasure chest, something like that. Anything that you could put something in is a container. And containers can be open or closed. Those are other checkboxes. But if you can put something in an object, it's a container. What's another type of object? Well, a supporter. A supporter is something that you can put things on. So something like a table, a shelf, or a counter. They don't seem to get used as much as containers, but they're still nice to have there. So a supporter has something on it. A container has something in it. Now, here is something that's a little odd, and that's an object cannot be both. And that is a little bit contrary to reality. For example, I could put things in my refrigerator, or I could put things on my refrigerator. But that's not how it works in our games, and that's just to reduce complexity. Because if I could put things in something and I could put things on something, then every object has to have two inventories, really. It has to have two sets of children. It has to store its external children and its internal children, and that introduces a kind of fairly non-trivial level of complexity that we're really trying to avoid. So one of the sacrifices to cramming a game into a tiny amount of memory is that we have to reduce the complexity. So to do that, we say objects can have things in them. Objects can be on something or in something, but not both. Right? Something can be a container, or it can be a supporter. It can't be both at the same time. So what else? Scenery objects. Scenery objects are great things to have in your game. They really provide your world a sense of depth. They are things that would be logically present in the environment. Let's imagine that you're at the beach. Well, and our room description says you're at a long sandy beach that stretches miles to the north and south. And well, okay, so in your mind, what do you think is there? Well, waves, oceans, sand, maybe reeds, seaweed, whatever, anything, the sun, anything you could imagine at the beach. Those things would be scenery objects. They're invisible objects that are just logically part of the environment that you can't pick up and take with you, right? So you could type, if you're at the beach, you type examine the sun, examine the waves, examine the sea, the sand. Those things are logically there. So those would be scenery objects. So you just put them in, make an object for them, check that they're scenery, put them at that location, and then when the player's at the beach, if they type examine the sun, examine the waves, examine the sand, they'll get a description. And it's like, oh, wow, hey, cool. There's actually some depth to the world here. Now, if they weren't scenery objects, if they were just regular objects, if the player were at the beach, you wouldn't want them to see, oh, there is sand here, there is waves here, there is sun here, there is ocean here, right? You want those things to not be explicitly listed out, and that's what checking them as a scenery object does. It says, this is an object here with a description, but just don't list it out, when you print out everything that's in the room. That's a way of it's a way of sneaking objects into the environment in case the player tries to look at them. So if you mention something in a room description, you should back it up with a scenery object, and so your world feels like it has some depth to it. And if you check that something is a scenery object, the portable box will get unchecked. You can't pick up a scenery object. That's not what scenery objects are for. And a specialized type of a scenery object is a backdrop. Now, there's no checkbox for a backdrop. You have to implement it using an event. Now, Backdrops are things like they're scenery objects that exist in more than one place. So let's say that you're at the beach, but there's several, there's a north beach, central beach, south beach, or whatever, or there's a forest that's 25 rooms. And anytime you're in the forest, you want to be able to look at the trees and the leaves and the birds or the sun, right? So no matter where you are in those locations, the scenery basically just follows you around. And that the technical term for that is a backdrop. And you implement a backdrop using an event that just says, okay, well, if I'm in one of these particular rooms, make the sun go to wherever the player is, right? Or if I'm in any of these rooms that happen to be forests, put the tree scenery object in the room where the player is. So backdrops are basically just scenery that follows the player around. And here's an example of some scenery objects. Let's imagine that you have an adventure game set in Pompeii in 71 AD or 69 AD. I don't remember when Mount Vesuvius erupted and destroyed the town, but in one of those years, you are a Roman citizen in that town. No matter where you are in that town, you could probably look at Mount Vesuvius. So in that case, Mount Vesuvius would be implemented as an object that really just sort of teleported it to wherever the player was. So you'd say, well, if I'm in any of these outdoor locations, just put Mount Vesuvius wherever the player is. And that way the player can always type, look at volcano, look at Mount Vesuvius, look, whatever, and a description of Mount Vesuvius will be provided. So that's what a backdrop is. It's really just scenery that kind of follows the player around, and there's a separate video on backdrops. They're really not hard to do, and if you add them, it just really adds a very professional level of polish to your game. So every time I see a scenery object and a backdrop, I'm like, oh yes, the student who made this game is really on the ball and knows what they're doing. So those are really the four major types of objects that you have. We have containers, you put things in them; supporters, you put things on them; scenery, invisible objects that are not portable, logically part of the environment; and backdrops, a special type of scenery object, scenery that is visible in more than one location and follows the player around. We use code to implement those using events. So if you have any questions on how to get any of this stuff working or what any of this stuff means, by all means, just let me know. I'll be happy to help you. Thanks for watching. Good luck with your adventure game.